Okay, Scott, I am back and the camera is rolling.
The camera is rolling. Here we go. My guest today is tax law expert Robert Wood. He is the host of the Tax Law Channel and partner at Wood & Porter in San Francisco. We're going to discuss a recent article in Tax Notes entitled, Why the Stadnick Case on False Imprisonment is a Lemon. In this article, Robert considers Stadnick, in which the tax court and Sixth Circuit held that a settlement payment for a few hours of incarceration was not excludable under Section 104. And Rob contends that the Sixth Circuit actually did a better job than the tax court here. Rob, thanks for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me back.
We talked about Stadnick in a previous video podcast. Can you review some of the elements of this case?
Sure, and this, as you say, Scott, we've been following this case for a while now. It was a case decided last year in 2009, might have been 2008, I think it was 2009, by the tax court. And the tax court did, in my view, a very bad job, not so much of the result of the case, which I'm not entirely sure I disagree with, but in the sort of platitudes that they threw out, and that was basically that any kind of false imprisonment or wrongful imprisonment recovery ought to be taxable. So, but to review the facts, Stadnick, and I hope I'm saying that name correctly, Mrs. Stadnick bought a used car at a car lot, wrote a check for it. I think it was a car for her son. All the parents listening will appreciate that, having had to buy cars for their kids. And the car turned out literally to be a lemon. I mean, it was almost a situation comedy fodder. The car broke down on the way home from the dealership. So she kept calling the dealership. The dealership wouldn't ever answer the phone or call her back. She kept getting the proverbial runaround. So she eventually stopped payment on the check. The Bank 1, I think it was, instead of putting a stop payment order on the check, somehow listed or stamped the check as NSF, non-sufficient funds. Essentially, the check bounced. The car dealership, which was maybe guilty of sharp practice, but the car dealership had a practice, and they did it here, of then calling the police or the DA's office complaining. And eventually, basically, that passing a bad check is, in most states now, illegal. It's a crime, and so they arrested her. She gets arrested. She, at home in front of family and friends, she spends a total of about 8 hours in custody. Basically, it's from about 6 p.m. one evening to about 2 a.m. where she's finally released. She gets patted down, she gets put in a holding cell, this kind of stuff. She later stipulates that she was never physically harmed. So eventually, this being America, understandably, she hires a lawyer. She eventually gets a $50,000 or $49,000 settlement, and the question is it taxable income or not? All the advisors at the case seem to tell her lawyer, even the mediator who heard them, the other side, the bank lawyer, they all said, hey, this isn't taxable, don't worry about it. But the IRS thought differently. She went to tax court and she said, this shouldn't be taxable. I was incarcerated. I wasn't physically harmed. She said that. She admitted she was never roughed up. She was never beaten up, anything like that. Not even, rough and putting the handcuffs on. So she was never hurt, she said, but isn't this tax-free? Tax court and the Sixth Circuit both said no, this isn't tax-free. Because you admitted you were never physically harmed. Section 104 requires physical harm. So I guess my problem with the case is not so much this seemingly inconsequential little decision and almost inconsequential settlement of $49,000, but what does it mean for bigger cases?
And as far as bigger cases go, there were some problems initially here with the claim, and then I guess the appeal. And your point here, one of the good points here is that this wasn't a false imprisonment case; it was a false arrest case.
Yep.
False arrest case. The bank paid I think the settlement here. surprised that there wasn't any kind of lemon law application here as well. But again, there were a lot of things missed, I think.
Yeah, that's right, and it's sort of hard when you look at a tax case because it's very tempting to start thinking mostly about the underlying case, and you have a limited record, so we don't, as you say, a lemon law. I would certainly hope that if anybody had to pay money here, it was this sleazy car dealership. Hopefully, I can't be sued for calling them sleazy. That's good. It's everything. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, the case, and you said at the beginning that I thought the Sixth Circuit did a better job than the tax court, and I do. And the reason for that is the Sixth Circuit said, look, we need to look at the facts. Obviously, the facts are really important in tax cases, and what this money was paid for. And Scott, as you just said, this money was paid for a false arrest, pretty inconsequential, and they kept stressing that Mrs. Stadnick said she was never injured, never roughed up, and so it was this sort of pure legal question of what this, or factual question, or both, what this money was paid for. It was paid for a false arrest. That's taxable. I think the more damaging opinion out there is the tax court opinion, where the tax court didn't just decide the case, but then went on and said, I think it's dicta, it's non-binding sort of verbiage from the court, but they say, any kind of imprisonment isn't physical, and therefore it should be taxable, not tax-free, and this kind of thing. So I would just say all those comments I think should be discounted. They are somewhat worrying when you consider someone who's, say, falsely accused, falsely arrested, wrongfully convicted, sometimes based on prosecutorial misconduct, things like burying evidence, and then spends years in prison. That person, I would submit, has by definition suffered physical consequences, physical injury or sickness.
And when you close out your article, you also bring up the point that there are some other rulings that may have actually applied here that might have worked in her favor that you sort of overlooked.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right, and it's been at least in the kind of limited, fortunately, the kind of limited community of lawyers that looks at a wrongful imprisonment, and the often very difficult task of proving that somebody was wrongly convicted and deserves to get out of jail, and then begins the long road under either state or federal law to get this person some money. There's been concern about the tax issue. I have to say that I'm kind of used to it now, but I do often get people who are absolutely shocked to find out that the tax treatment of these kinds of recoveries isn't clear, because there are a lot of them these days with DNA evidence, and you'd think that there'd be some statement, but the IRS has been quiet, the Treasury Department has been quiet, and certainly you don't want to have the only authority out there a case like Stadnick, which I say is a lemon.
My guest, Robert Wood, host of the Tax Law Channel here on the Legal Broadcast Network. He is a partner at Wood and Porter in San Francisco. He's written over 30 books. One of my favorites, The Legal Guide to Independent Contractor Status. You might want to pick that up. Rob, we appreciate your time. Thanks for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.